All right. Welcome to our group study on the hidden words. This book is, I think, unique among Baha'u'llah's writings in how it really needs no introduction and how the content really speaks for itself. I feel like it is helpful for many of Baha'u'llah's writings to give historical context, to sort of explain, help walk you through the argument. Sometimes outlining is helpful. Sometimes it's really helpful to know who Baha'u'llah was addressing and what the historical context is and so forth. The Hidden Words, I think, just stands alone and speaks for itself. Despite having said that, I'll say just a couple of things about it, although we don't know that much in detail about the circumstances of its revelation, except that it was in 1274 AH, that's the Islamic lunar calendar, which is 1857 or 1858. So this was several years before Baha'u'llah's formal declaration of his mission. It ranks among much earlier writings of Baha'u'llah. It was revealed in Baghdad while he lived in Baghdad after his retreat, his 2-year-long retreat to the mountains of Sulaymaniyah, which happened soon after his initial exile to Baghdad. So this was a period of rebuilding of the Baha'i community, which had really collapsed during that period. And it is said that, as Shoghi Effendi writes, he said that Baha'u'llah was inspired to write this as he paced, wrapped in his meditations, the banks of the Tigris River. So that's our one sentence sort of context. It wasn't written or revealed to anyone in particular, which makes it somewhat unusual among Baha'u'llah's writings. The title, The Hidden Words, is interesting. It used to be called The Hidden Book of Fatima, and then somewhat early in Baha'u'llah's ministry, it became referred to as the Hidden Words. And there's a little bit of context behind that, which may be a little bit helpful. The Hidden Book of Fatima was said to have been words spoken to Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad. After Muhammad's death, Fatima was disconsolate, and it is said that the angel Gabriel, to encourage her, spoke these words to Fatima, and the words were written down by Imam Ali. But it's kind of a mythical book, and no one ever saw this book that was supposedly revealed to Fatima, which supposedly consisted of these gem-like utterances, as consolation for the heart. But it was supposedly in the possession of the imams of the faith, the Shiite imams, and as among in their possession. And so Baha'u'llah saying this is the Hidden Book of Fatima, it's a bit of not so coded sort of pre-declaration of Baha'u'llah's intention. Saying, well, he must be connected to the hidden imam if he's saying this is the content of the Hidden Book of Fatima. So it ended up being retitled as the Hidden Words. So what's hidden about the words, I think, is that helps explain that piece of the title. So there is a bit of veiled declaration in the titling of it. In terms of the order of the hidden words, a word can be said because the hidden words, as you read them, of course, there's a beginning and an ending to them. But the original text of the hidden words in Baha'u'llah's own hand is held in the archives at the Baha'i World Center. And I looked online for an image of it because it's such a central work. I assumed that there would be an image online. I couldn't find one. But I can describe it to you, and Baha'is who go on pilgrimage to Akka can see it in the mansion of Baji in Akka. At least a very high quality reproduction. The original is safely stored in the archives. But it's on a rather large piece of paper let's say, a couple of 8.5 by 11s, if you imagine something around that size. And the hidden words are written in very small script, in no particular order, as though it were a handful of gems scattered on the page. Mm-hmm. So they're in all sort of directions, and each one is just a little blob of text that resolves itself when you look closely. And the important thing about that is that there's no formal beginning and ending to it. So the hidden words intrinsically have no order. So the ordering that you see when you read it was set at some early point by some scribe, and we don't know under what circumstances, who determined hidden word number 1 versus hidden word number 77 and so forth. And I say that because it's very tempting, especially in a study class, to read the hidden words and to look for the groupings and say, well, why are 1 through 6, seem to have a common theme, and 8 through 12 seem to have a common theme, that sort of a thing. And to the extent that there are thematic groupings in the hidden words, that was a later decision of the scribes, who then copied it and made it available to the friends. In terms of the position of this book among Baha'u'llah's writings, Shoghi Effendi describes it as Baha'u'llah's preeminent ethical work, as he describes Baha'u'llah's Book of Certitude, the Kitab-i-Gan, as his preeminent doctrinal work, as he describes the Seven Valleys as his preeminent mystical work. So that's another way to try to position the hidden words. Although as we read, and we'll see already, I think, in the first few Arabic hidden words, it goes well beyond ethical exhortations to content of a far more mystical nature. As I read the hidden words, I look at it as saying, I try to group and organize things myself, of course, and the way I kind of group it in my head is the hidden words say something about God, they say something about ourselves, and they say something about others and our relationship to others. What they end up saying about God and what they say about ourselves, there's a very interesting overlap between the two. And what they say about others is truly, I think, that ethical foundation that Shoghi Effendi was referring to. Very interesting about the hidden words is that there's no mention, unless I could be proven wrong as we go through it again. I don't believe there's any mention of the prophet in the hidden words. So you have our relationship to God, our relationship to others, but there's no explicit discussion of the station of the prophet, or as Baha'is call it, the manifestation. It's almost sort of taken out of this particular text. So I've just passed out a set of quotations, which at certain points we might refer to these to help supplement the points made in the hidden words. It's often the case, very often the case, I think, for Baha'u'llah's writings that his earlier, later writings sometimes speak to each other, throw light on each other. Sometimes restricting oneself to one particular quotation gives a kind of one-dimensional sense, and the real three-dimensionality of it is only visible when you read across different time periods and different tablets. So this is this small compilation is one attempt to provide some of that three-dimensionality, especially to this idea about the divine spark within the soul, which emerges very in the early Arabic hidden words. There's so much more written about that sort of divine nobility of the soul, the nature of the soul, the essential unknowability of the human soul.
Yeah, I think it might be helpful actually to look at the subtitles that you chose.
Sure.
Just very quickly, you chose basically 7 themes in this compilation. Mm-hmm. So do you want to just read them?
Sure. I mean, one theme is that the soul is our essential reality, as apart from, of course, our body, but not necessarily in the Cartesian dualistic sense, as we'll see. In terms of the origin of the soul, it's described as being an emanation from God, in a way, God's own description or remembrance of his own self. It's an array of that divine self-description in some mystical sense. But although it can be described in these kinds of metaphorical terms, the essence of the soul also can never be comprehended. So we have to take a humble step backwards whenever contemplating this topic and realize that we are left only with metaphors and approximations to reality, which ultimately is incomprehensible. Another section. This is section 4 on the nature of the soul as an intelligible reality or non-material substance. Another section on the soul being exempt from space and time. I think there may be only 1 or 2 quotations there. That the divine light or divine love is deposited within the human reality is a major theme that's found so poignantly in the Hidden Words, but also is very often found in other tablets as well. And finally, and related to that, the idea of the human reality being a mirror for the divine reflection is a theme which also is found a lot in the Baha'i writings, and it's really interesting and instructive to pull together various quotations on that theme. I hope to be speaking less and less as these sessions go, but let's start. Let's jump in.
Should I read the preamble?
Yeah, please.
Part 1 from the Arabic. Preamble. He is the glory of glories. This is that which hath descended from the realm of glory, uttered by the tongue of power and might, and revealed unto the prophets of old. We have taken the inner essence thereof and clothed it in the garment of brevity as a token of grace unto the righteous, that they may stand faithful unto the covenant of God, may fulfill in their lives his trust, and in the realm of spirit obtain the gem of divine virtue.
There's also the sense of trust, as God has entrusted us with something precious. And by fulfilling in our lives his trust, we're making ourselves worthy of that thing that's been bestowed upon us. You know, that the gem, that light, that spark of the spirit that's within us is in a way the trust of God within us. And to fulfill in our lives this trust can also mean, you know, acting in a way that's worthy of that.
Right.
I guess, I think I'm kind of there with Kim, and my looking at that, trust is something that you have, that you repose in someone else for it to become something more. And I'm reminded of the hidden word that's, number 13, I've created thee rich. And it goes on to talk about why dost thou bring thyself down, but I created thee rich. So just being created as God's image means that God's trusting us to do our part in being his image, I guess. And so the idea of just the dignity of the human, that the creator of the universe is actually entrusted something of God's own character to us to act on, is kind of a mind-blowing thought.
And that's the norm. That's actually the baseline. It's not that we are already whole. We are already that, and there's external things are creating it not to be so.
Yeah. And that's such a concept coming from a Catholic faith, because you're born a sinner, you die a sinner, and to have the whole concept. And I have to often remind myself when I'm reading the writings that, like, no, I'm good enough now. Like, I have the values now, I have the gems now. Because that's the constant reminder of that Catholic guilt, that I am a sinner and I'm born a sinner. Like, because you're baptized the minute you're born, because you came into this world a sinner. Like,
you need the cleansing.
yeah, and so, like, just that concept. Like, I had to have a priest come into my bedroom and bless my bedroom before I was even born, because I'm already coming into this world a sinner, which is very different than what Baha'u'llah is saying. Baha'u'llah is saying, you came into this world with all the knowledge and all, with all the gems, the value. You are noble, and you're the fact that you're a creation, which is like it's a hard concept to learn.
And later in the Hidden Words, we see he dwells at some length about transgression, about what we've failed to do, but it's not primordial, whereas in Catholicism it's located in a sort of primeval, event that, the stain that we carry with us.
Yeah.
But for Baha'u'llah, that innate creation is purely noble and divine. But if we don't fulfill in our lives this trust, then we get to hear about it later on. Oh, you are dead upon the couch of heedlessness and so forth.
What's funny is like all the departing prayers are always forgiving your sins. It's like automatic, like.
Right.
That's
There's
the
an
baseline.
assumption there, right?
Yeah, there's an assumption across all the departed prayers that you sin
Yeah.
that you had before.
Don't say anything for me, friends.
The idea of the original blessing rather than the original sin. Matthew Fox writes about that. He was a Dominican priest who was excommunicated for writing about that.
Wow.
And he's now an Episcopal priest and sort of teaches Teilhard's cosmic mass to the universe. But I just think the Pope just recently said, somebody asked him about hell and who's in hell, and he said, well, the way I look at it, if hell exists, nobody's in hell. So I thought that was pretty darn interesting.
Yeah. But Bob talks about hell being your distance from God.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
separation
That it's
from
that
God.
separation. That's the
Separation.
hell. It's
Yeah.
not an actual physical place.
And Richard Rohr talks about we are created in the image and likeness of God, but he says we all have embedded in us the image of God. That's just innate. But we have to take responsibility to assume the likeness. That likeness part is human responsibility. The image was God's responsibility. So I always thought that was
Interesting.
really interesting.
Well, in the Baha'i writings too, there's also references to the need for education, and I'm assuming spiritual education is what enables us to fulfill that. I can't remember the quote from Abdul Baha, but there's one about that. But for the lack of true knowledge or true education or something, use. But Baha'u'llah's, of course, is regard man as a mine rich in gems
Inestimable
of
value.
inestimable value.
Yeah.
Education can alone cause it to reveal its treasures and enable mankind to benefit therefrom.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we often think of that education as what, like material education, but I think in this context, to think of it as that need for spiritual education enables us to find, those gems of those heavenly perfections.
Yeah.
And just this week, I was reading that spiritual education it's written in poetry. Religious education is written in prose. And then the poetic part, the spiritual poetic part, is the part that contains the mystery, the paradox.
Yes.
And I thought that's really cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
I like from the standpoint of equity that this is how we're all equal. You may have a different circumstance, you may be born in a different place, you may have this education, that access in some ways may be something external maybe, but everyone starts out as equal. So when I'm relating to you, I need to understand that you also have a direct relationship with spirit, with faith. You're already noble. So when I relate to you, I have to see you in a different way. Like That's my spiritual obligation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, the first hidden word already, I think, touches on some of the things we've been discussing.
Mm.
It says something about what we have to do, and this is something about what we are or what we become. So why don't we, and we could actually probably do it in the entire session just on this first hidden word.
Yeah.
So much in it.
O Son of Spirit, my first counsel is this: possess a pure, kindly, and radiant heart, that thy may be sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, and everlasting.
So what does sovereignty mean in this? I just get
Yes.
puzzled about that.
Yeah. I'm looking at the Arabic to see that sometimes there can be a little extra insight from looking at the Arabic, but it's a pretty straight up translation. On this particular phrase, لِتَمْلِكَ مُلْكًا دَائِمًا بَاقِيًا أَزَّلًا قَدِيمًا. It says, that you may possess mulkan, a sovereignty, just like the Baha'i month, mulk is sovereignty. That you may possess a sovereignty that is ancient, imperishable, and everlasting. One thing that I wonder as I read this is Baha'u'llah is he describing like an elevation of our souls that take place when we fulfill that requirement, when we have a pure, kindly, and radiant heart? Or when you look at, what in the universe has a sovereignty that's ancient, perishable, everlasting, that seems like a description of God. So
That's the puzzlement.
yeah, is he saying the soul becomes God-like,
Yeah.
or the God-like, or those divine attributes that were already there within, as we see in a few hidden words, become manifested by the heart that's pure and kindly and radiant? Yeah, whose sovereignty is it, in other words?
Yeah.
Is it ours, or do we get, we have a crown on our head and we get, that's our spiritual
Lowercase,
reward for being pure and kindly and radiant? Or is it that we become God-like when we let go of the boundaries of the ego and when the drop reunites with the sea, it takes on the characteristic of the sea, which is an eternal sovereignty.
Sovereignty can also mean authority and ownership of, like, to have the authority and the power over oneself. Like in indigenous cultures and in communities, that's probably one of the most important things, politically speaking, is their sovereignty of their nations. That they have the ability to determine how they'll rule, how they'll govern their community outside of anyone else. So and after seeing this for so many years, now that I'm teaching my classes about indigenous culture and the importance of sovereignty, this is like one of the standards we're asked to teach the kids. It means something so different to me now. When I see that this sovereignty is your ability to know that you possess this thing. It is yours. There is no mediary between you and this. You own it. You also have the ability to have something that is ancient, imperishable, and everlasting, and it's yours. And you control it. And it's your destiny and your possession. So it means something different to me now when I read it in that way.
No, and it hit me. I love this verse. I try to start my day with it every day. And it hit me just last week or so that everything that we have, of course, comes from God. So when Baha'u'llah is saying possess a pure, kindly, and radiant heart, we can't do that without God enabling us to do that. So there is an acquiescence to that, even though it's kind of an active tense. Possess, take it. But we can't take it unless God has already given us the wherewithal to see that it matters and to claim it. But then what's so interesting when you bring the sovereignty idea in, for me, is it's a little bit like the distinction between the drop of water and the sea in this respect. When you think of sovereignty, the sovereignty of the nation of Ukraine, or you think of the sovereignty of an indigenous people in Oregon or something, it means that there's a separateness that's not in a bad sense, but in a dignity sense. And I think of sovereignty. I was having this wonderful conversation with Roger the other day. I said to him, Roger, talk to me about why all of these manifestations, not just Baha'u'llah, but Jesus, God, hallowed be thy name. What is it about the names? Everything's about names. What's that about? And his interpretation was that, God directed Adam to name all of the things. So here's this sort of amorphous, completely fluid interconnections between what's coming into your senses, and yet you see distinctions. This is a dog, it's not a cat. This is, that Adam, human beings, have the task of seeing how things, one from another, are actually different. And his sense was that this is one of the things that names mean. So when I bring that insight, as it were, to this, it's like sovereignty means that which is encompassed in a name has its own integrity. And God gives us the gift of seeing, the side-by-sideness, as it were, of different things that God has created. And by entrusting us with naming them, we get to participate in some sense in the creative work of God and participating in the world of creation. All these things are being different. So anyway, the point being that for me, sovereignty is realizing the dignity of things being different. And if it's an ancient, imperishable, and everlasting sovereignty, that's an incredibly big deal.
So, as I'm looking at the Arabic, there's also a really interesting play on words that connects the first and the second half of this hidden word. So the first half he says, possess, pure and kind of, that thy may be a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, and everlasting. But the Arabic words are actually, they're all the same. So he says, amlika is the word, and it's all based on a triliteral root system. So the three letters are M, L, and K. Malik, which means to possess something. It also means king, because a king in Arabic is someone who possesses everything. But you can also possess something. And when Baha'u'llah says, possess a pure, kindly, and radiant heart, he says, amlika, qalban, jayidan, hasanan, munira. Litamlika, mulkan. So that triliteral root of possession appears 3 times in the hidden word, but it's completely invisible in the English translation. So one way to maybe retranslate it so you kind of hear the repetition, he's saying, possess a pure, kindly, and radiant heart, that your possession may be an ancient, imperishable, and everlasting possession. But you can also translate, because of the relationship to kings and sovereigns, you can also translate the word mulkan here as a sovereignty. So he's saying your possession of this pure, kindly, and radiant heart is equivalent to possessing this ancient, imperishable, and everlasting possession, or sovereignty. I don't know if that helps or adds light or
well, it sounds like maybe one way of understanding what you just said is that to have the dignity in responding to God's directive that we possess these things means that in the possessing, we give them this honorific, we give them this sense of kingship almost.
You can think of this book like a contract between you and God, because it's a covenant, right? So if you fulfill the contract with what is in this book, essentially, in return, you will, receive divine confirmations, or whatever, anything that comes with that. So your soul progresses as it should, and so on, So that's the way I look at it. It's almost like a contract between you and God.
Yeah, and it's interesting that he brings out the concept of covenant of God in the preamble. This is an expression of that ancient covenant, symbolized by the rainbow to Abraham, and in different ways to different prophets. But the essence of that covenant is a relationship with the divine, where something is expected from us, and something is granted when that expectation is met.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, the first hidden word is like the essence of that covenant.
Right.
This is what's expected, and this is what is granted. It's sovereignty, but spiritual sovereignty.
Yeah.
Should I go?
Yeah.
O Son of Spirit, the best beloved of all things in my sight is justice. Turn not away therefrom, if thou desirest me, and neglect it not that I may confide in thee. By its aid thou shalt see with thine own eyes, and not through the eyes of others, and shalt know of thine own knowledge, and not through the knowledge of thy neighbor. Ponder this in thy heart, how it behoveth thee to be. Verily justice is my gift to thee, and the sign of my loving kindness. Set it then before thine eyes. This is my most powerful one of the most powerful ones tonight.
It's worth mentioning the word justice here is a translation of the Arabic word insaf. And that's worth mentioning because there are two different words that are sometimes translated as justice in the Baha'i writings. One that we associate with houses of justice, and that word is different. That word is adl, which also has connotations of straightness. But insaf is from the Arabic root nasafa, which has further connotations of making an equal division, dividing something into equal parts. And so there's a slight difference in meaning between these two different words for justice, both of which appear in Baha'u'llah's writings. And in fact, when you look at how Shoghi Effendi translates insaf, in most of his writings he translates it as fair-mindedness, which is more of an individual virtue, about treating people equally, as the Arabic verb kind of implies. It's often read out, I believe, slightly incorrectly as like justice on like a societal level, like social, the kind of justice dispensed by, say, a house of justice. But that's a different word, and I think a different connotation. And I think that's clear when he says by the aid of insaf, by the aid of fair-mindedness. He says what happens. You see through your own eyes and not through the eyes of your neighbor. He's describing a personal relation, how we relate to our neighbor.
Yeah. From a Christian point of view, when I read this, it reminds me that when we're talking to other Christians, we have to remind ourselves that we do not know what they believe. We cannot assume what another Christian believes, even within Christianity, within Christians of our own community, because we interpret for ourselves, or we have had things interpreted for us. And so, in many aspects, like when other Baha'is ask me, how do I talk to other Christians, I always have to remind myself that even when I was a Christian, I didn't know what other Christians believed. Because I went to a Christian school and we all had distinctions between us. And I remember the first time we were in a class and we learned about wine, for instance. Just the whole concept of wine. We came out of the class and five of me and my friends, some of them didn't talk to each other for a week because some of them took it literally. We must always have wine at communion. And other people were like, well, what if someone's an alcoholic? They can't drink wine. It's like, but Jesus drank wine, but he didn't have water back then. It's like these concepts, right? Of taking things literally and not thinking for yourself and allowing others to think for you. I think that plays a huge role in what people believe. And so when I read this, it reminds me that I always was asked to think for myself, to always question. And in those moments, it felt like I was doing something wrong, but now I realize it's because I was asked to question. I was reminded to question, because questioning means that I get to think for myself, and others don't get to interpret for me. And so I feel like this is just a constant reminder of there's only ignorance when you allow other people to think for you, and you only listen to what your neighbor has to say, and not what is the writings of God Himself.
Did you already? I stepped out for a second. But
I
did you already?
read number 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you already explain why J is capitalized?
No.
No,
Yeah, I was gonna ask
That was
about
gonna be
that.
my next question.
Yeah.
no. Well, there are no capital letters in Arabic or Persian, so these are all interpretive decisions.
But Shoghi
Shoghi
Effendi would
Effendi.
make that decision.
Yeah, Shoghi Effendi
He must have been
kind of
person.
personifies it almost as he capitalizes everything having to do with the first or second tier of the rings of the Baha'i ring stone symbol. In other words, anything having to do with God or everything having to do with the manifestation of God or anything related to the prophets of God or anything above this world in the sort of ladder of divinity. That's the general translation. I don't know. Rule is to capitalize those words. So here it's very interesting because he normally doesn't capitalize.
Well, he doesn't
virtues.
capitalize it the second time in that same quote.
Right, which
Yeah.
is why
The
to
first
me,
time,
when I always
but
read
not the
this
second
as, justice with a capital J seemed like social justice to me. That's what I always thought, but you said that's not the right word. So,
It's more fair-mindedness.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, social justice is a huge focus in the Baha'i faith, but I don't think it's derivable from hidden word number 2. There's
Well,
other
then-
tablets where it is a focus.
If it is capitalized, I think of it more like my the best beloved of things in my sight is justice. Justice is then a divinity. It is something of divine origin and not necessarily the justice of laws.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Not a material justice, but one in which you are determining and discerning a situation based on a spiritual, through a spiritual lens, not one of a material lens of righteousness or wrong, good, bad, but maybe mercy, love.
There's I think another example if memory serves where Shoghi Effendi does the same thing, and there's a tablet of Baha'u'llah where he refers to trustworthiness. Maybe that wasn't even Shoghi Effendi who translated that actually. But there's a tablet of trustworthiness where Baha'u'llah says he had a vision of trustworthiness on a pillar of light.
Personifies.
And I think that T is also capitalized there. Sometimes it can just be capitalized for emphasis.
Yeah, maybe it doesn't mean
Yeah.
I don't
everything.
like that.
I want to rule.
Because I learned that it's like the J, it has something to do with like a God, the figurehead concept versus. Because even in the Bible, the W is capitalized when it talks about we. And
Interesting.
the interpretation of it is when Christians are reading it, they're like
the
we
royal
Christ,
we.
yeah, the Trinity. That doesn't actually, the word Trinity doesn't actually exist. And so then but from like a theologian point of view, it was the concept of like all of the ancients, the we's,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was capitalized. I will always remember it. The only W capitalized in all of the Bible is the we.
Well, as one of the attributes of God, it definitely deserves capitalization, along with all of them.
I wanted to ask about that because, it sort of jumped out at me that it was capitalized in that first part and then it isn't at the end. But the whole notion that there is spiritual reality, like the human soul is a substantive thing, even though it's not composed of electrons and protons as far as we could tell so far. Sort of. No, it wouldn't be. Anyway, but is part of the way that God creates that there are certain emanations of God's being, and we call them attributes, but in fact, the real substantive stuff of spirit, and they're real. So when he says, "This is my gift to you," it isn't just, like in philosophy, you can analyze yourself and come up with words that aren't actual things. They're just inferences about a collection of shared experiences. So we see all these dogs, and so we use the word dog. But a dog in the regular world is either one particular animal. But in the spiritual world, is it possible, as part of what we're learning from Baha'u'llah, that there are actual things of spiritual substance, like humility, justice, kindness, that are real things that come from God and are implanted in us. That we either suppress or we cultivate, whatever we do with it, but they're actually real. They're not just concepts. I mean, that's what came to my mind. I started thinking to myself, well, if we're talking about Martin Luther King on his way from Selma, and his whole heart is just absorbed in justice, that there's something real from God that has burst into life in him, and he has to do this march. Because it's real. It's not just, will I do it or won't I, making choices, and of course all of that is also true. But there's something substantive that's of a spiritual nature that actually is given to us by God. It's not just a descriptor, which I was puzzled over the word attribute, because does that mean that it can't be an actual substantive thing? It's just a feature, a sort of a way we draw conclusions about inferences of shared experiences. I don't know.
It's a great question. It reminds me of what William James, the American philosopher and psychologist, said about the Platonic forms. And I can only paraphrase it, but he had this beautiful paragraph where he describes the Platonic forms as, inferences that people made about realities that are just as real because they shape human behavior and they direct the course of civilizations, and they're, and so to us we might as well categorize them, as just as real as a table or a chair or something like that, because the reality of something is not. I'm kind of going beyond the quote, but I think the spirit of what he was saying was that the reality of these things is a function of their influence in the world.
Right.
And he was saying, these Platonic forms, whether or not you want to get into the nitpicking metaphysical question of, well, are they real or are they just a concept? Look at what they do in the world.
Yeah.
That's what makes them real, and that's kind of the pragmatic, that's kind of the argument for pragmatism.
Grammatically, they're nouns.
That's right.
So it's a thing.
People, places, thing. Yeah. Ideas.
Yeah.
And,
Although Thomas Aquinas says that God is a verb, right?
well, that's the
Yes,
next one.
that's a great one.
Yeah.
Another
Yeah.
wrinkle. But anyway.
Thomas Aquinas said that. Oh, that's great.
Something around
All the
that.
way
I have
back.
to,
Yeah.
when you meet Kent, you can ask him about that.
Uh-huh.
Kent Bertner, he's a real lover of
Definitely have to arrange a
Barbara,
meeting.
do you see that bowl next to you? Is that book right? Yeah, that one right there that you just touched. Can you look that up for a second? What is that one?
What is God's name?
Yeah, no. There's
Yes,
another
below
book.
it.
Yeah, Where is God? That one.
Where is God?
Yeah, that book is
Fire.
the idea.
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah.
That book is the idea that God is a verb.
Oh,
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Oh, yeah.
In a
She's
children's
read that
book,
to
it
my,
captures in like 10
teenage
pages
friends.
that notion of how God acts in the world.
Yeah. It's,
Love.
Is that the one, how does God get things done? Or is
Yeah,
that a different book? Oh,
pretty
yeah.
much.
there's a
Yeah.
trilogy
Yeah.
of these
Okay,
books.
that's good.
Yeah, and they're
Are
all
these
great.
my books?
No.
I don't think so. I think a rabbi wrote that one, but I could be
A
wrong.
rabbi wrote.
I could be wrong.
O Son of Man, veiled in my immemorial being and in the ancient eternity of my essence, I knew my love for thee, therefore I created thee, have engraved on thee mine image, and revealed to thee my beauty.
Was it? Oh my goodness.
I love how it inverts our sort of notion of causality. God's love for us precedes our creation.
Yeah.
I don't like to go down the predestination route. It's caused a lot of problems.
Now let's not talk about what's not capitalized.
I guess I've always, when I've thought about that, is that, I loved my kids before they were ever conceived.
Yes, that's a great way to think about it.
And
This is
again,
so true.
obviously, I'm a person and all that, but
No.
just that
Yes.
I can see how that could be possible.
Yeah, yeah. Just the idea of it
Yeah.
made me happy just thinking
But
about being a mom. Then reality hit.
I do talks about that a lot, about how that reality that mothers have with their children.
You know that first name. You go by first name now?
Yeah, we're like that now. We're like that now.
Tara is what he's talking about.
I knew exactly who she meant.
Big A.
I listen to him so much that we're like a deep. So anyway, and we all know who deep is. I talk about him so much. It's a deep, okay? But he talks a lot about how the analogy of the mother and the child is such a great concept for understanding God and humanity.
Yeah.
Because, like, chemically, I loved him before he was a thing.
Yeah.
You know, like immediately I had all of this massive amount of hormonal love, and it was like, you know, just that concept. It's like, it's just there's no way to describe it until you feel it.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Because they're our very essence.
Well, and everyone knows what that feeling is. You know, it's like Barbara said, like spirituality is set in metaphors.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because metaphors so powerfully help us imagine what the person's talking about. Yeah.
Can we just squeeze in 4 because it's almost it's
Yes.
a very similar
Yeah.
theme.
O Son of Man, I love thy creation, hence I created thee. Wherefore do thou love me, that I may name thy name, and fill thy soul with the spirit of life. It's the naming.
Yes.
So many parts to that.
It's hard to read this one without crying.
I know, it's actually one of my favorite songs is this one. I know a different version of it.
Oh yeah, I know Ramin.
Oh yeah, I taught Leon one version of it. It was one of the first Baha'i songs that someone sang to me.
We're really remiss in not including some musical renditions of these.
Music.
in this,
Well, I can sing and you can sing it
reading.
with me. Want to?
I
Maybe
don't know
you'll
if I
sing it
know
too.
it.
Solo.
Alright, I might be off tune.
Yeah,
I have to sing again. O Son of Man, I love thy creation, hence I created thee. And then repeat. O Son of Man, I love thy creation, hence I created thee. Wherefore do thou love me, that I may name thy name? Wherefore do thou love me, that I may name thy name? And fill thy soul with the spirit of life, with the spirit of life. And fill thy soul with the spirit of life, with the spirit of life. I'm really off tune, but
Oh, you sound beautiful.
That was
Lovely.
lovely.
thank you.
Wonderful.
The first sentence was such a peculiar gathering of words. I love thy creation, hence I created thee. So I created thee, I brought you into being. That is a result of I love bringing thee into being. Wherefore do thou love me, that I may name thy name, and fill thy soul with the spirit of life. So it's that love. It's just really all about love is the real stuff of creating.
What do you think it means that I may name thy name? What do you think that's about?
Name thy name.
Acknowledge, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Acknowledge you.
to the Son of Man. So it's
Oh, so name means like
calling
call
your
out.
name. Yeah. calling
Oh.
To see you, well, you know, this is Roger's point, not mine, but you are different. You know, you are adjacent to, and you're not the same as the thing you're adjacent to. And I name this thing this and that thing that. So I'm naming you. I'm giving you a name. I'm giving you a unique place in the creation that I've undertaken.
There's also this concept of a name, like to not have a name, to be given a name. You know, that like possessiveness that people have, where it's like I am not a person without a name, or I am not a being without a name. Like, because like I think it the whole concept of like psychologically not having a name is like I don't exist. I don't matter. And that I name, because like my mom has this obsessiveness with the concept of all the names of God, like a poster of all the names of God and like Jew and like Hebrew and all that stuff. And so it's just like this whole concept of like being named feels like a sense of passage or a sense of like I don't know.
Well, in Baha'u'llah would often give people new names too.
Yeah, that's true. You
There's
change
some
their
significance
names.
to that.
There's something about the concept of names.
You know, our son Thomas became a Jesuit volunteer, which is a world of accompaniment, which I know is a Baha'i idea, that you don't look down on people and take care of them, you accompany them. But part of what the JVs, the Jesuit volunteers, would draw out of in the process of their getting oriented toward living a life of being there with others, whether it's, you know, a homeless shelter or battered women or whatever, is that the whole point of being a human is to banish anonymity. You know, that's somebody who is going to be walking through the streets and maybe there's a homeless person. You don't know their name, they have a face, so they're human, sort of though, because you don't know their name.
Yeah, are you human if you don't have a name? That whole concept.
Exactly, that's so your
Yeah.
point, that in a certain sense, when you finally get to know someone and you learn their name, their humanity, be there instead of just, you know, I think, you know, what JVs will say after they've lived a life of service that way for a year or 2 years, in Thomas's case in Peru, is they're just, you can never actually not notice the human in a human even that you don't know. There's a gift in that.
So it becomes the eye is you are seeing them through God's eyes. To love another person is to see them with the
Yeah,
eyes
that's
of
a
God.
great way to put it.
So then it's like that I may name thy name, meaning the God in me, or God gets to name us, or I see you and through divinity, like that I may name thy name.
It's interesting, like linguistically, what's going on. It's easy to lose sight of the profound distinction because they're all words and it's just a string of consonants and vowels and all of that. But most of the words we use are everyday words that have dictionary definitions and so forth. But proper nouns are like they're a different order of language, you know, because whereas the word dog refers to a category. You know, when you name your pet, you're elevating it to something we only do with other human beings. And the name that we name human beings it specifies one instance out of a category. And that's like a very, I think, special kind of leap that's made, you know, imaginative leap and cognitive leap that's made when you have proper nouns versus just the other words of language that usually fill our ears.
And one of the distinctions is between noticing and loving. As soon as you give that dog a name, you've entrusted it with a piece of your heart.
Yeah. And we're in that, you know, this grouping, if there is a intrinsic, you know, grouping of hidden words here, on the divine love, you know, and how that divine love is connected with, you know, the naming of our name. And maybe next week we could start with section 6 in the handouts on this very topic of that divine love which resides within. For me, it's really powerful. What's in the Baha'i rings beyond just what's in the hidden words, and there's a lot on it. And I think it'd be neat to start with that and read, just kind of let it wash over us and get a sense of just how pervasive a theme this is in the Baha'i writings.